Hi boys and girls. I hope you had a nice weekend. The weather was really quite beautiful. I hope you had some time to get outdoors and spend some time doing things that you enjoyed. Now that we're back for our second week of remote learning, let's pick up from where we left off last week. We started to talk about the importance of using equivalent fractions and finding common denominators to make sure that we understand why one fraction is either greater than, less than, or in some cases equivalent to another. So I'm going to take a look at the chart that we made on equivalent fractions. That would be helpful for you to have in front of you, along with a couple of problems. Let's go back and look at a student book page activity from page 263, number 1. And I know some of you sent me a screenshot of this and talked to me a little bit about some questions you had through Seesaw. So in this question, we're looking at Brianna and Corey and taking a look at a fruit strip, some bubble gum. And Brianna there, it says chewed, out of 3 pieces, chewed 2/3. So I am going to put around 2/3. Just going to put a circle around that. And then Corey, it says out of 5 pieces, chewed 3/5. So I'm going to put a circle around those two fractions. And hopefully you recognize when you were doing your student book pages that those two fractions were on your chart in order to help you to create equivalent fractions with a common denominator. So I'm looking out at 2/3. I'm comparing it to the next equivalent fraction, which is 4/6, and then 6/9, 8/12, 10/15. I'm going to stop there for just a moment. I'm going to go down to 3/5. I'm going to look at 6/10, 9/15. Okay, so I realize that right away I have 2 fractions that now have the same denominator. 2/3 is equivalent to 10/15, and 3/5 is equivalent to 9/15. So that should have helped me to determine that Brianna actually ate just a bit more than Corey did for that problem. The second problem I want to take a look at is on page 264. And for this problem, I'm going to take a look at 2 of the fractions that you were comparing. So for this one, Corey this time ate 5/8. Of his fruit roll-up strip candy, and Brianna this time ate 3/5. Okay, so when I look back on my chart that I made, I don't have a common denominator yet for both of those 2 fractions, but I can find one by remembering to count out multiples. So when I look at these 2 denominators, I'm looking at 5 and 8. I'm going to simply begin by thinking of counting out my multiples for 5, which again are pretty easy. So I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30, 35, and 40. I can stop there. For 8, I know my multiples beginning with 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. When I get to 40, I realize I now have that common denominator. So now I'm going to look at my 3/5 and I'm going to think 3/5 would be equal to how many 40ths, and 5/8 would be equal to how many 40ths. So I know that 40 is 8 times greater than 5. So I need to make my numerator now 8 times greater than it is currently. So 3 times 8 would be 24. Okay, so now I know my 3/5 are equivalent to 24 40ths. Go down here to my 5/8. I know that 40 is 5 times greater than 8. So I need to do the same thing to my numerator. Make it 5 times greater, so 5 times 5 is 25. Wow, look at how close these two fractions are to each other. Okay, I notice that I have 24/40 that is equivalent to 3/5 and 25/40. So by only 1/40 this time has Corey eaten more of his fruit strip than Brianna. Okay, the next piece that I want to look at is going to be related to an activity that you're going to be using for part of today's assignment. And that is going to be on student book, page 266 and 267. Now, on page 266, I want to encourage you to really try and think about using your common denominators, going beyond just the shading and looking for what the common denominator would be for each of those fractions to help you prove that your answer is correct. Okay, and then on page 267, which I have a screenshot of now, I want to also remind you about the importance of using something like a straight edge to help you when you are comparing these fractions. So let's just take a look at one of those problems together. This is problem 1A. Use the bars to show and name two fractions that are equivalent to 8/12. The denominators for two fractions you can make are filled in for you. So I can see that in the first fraction, again, I can see that the denominator is 12, and I can see that that rectangle is cut into 12 equal pieces, and 8 of those have been shaded in. So for the next fraction, I'm looking at the denominator is half of that amount. It's 6. So I'm going to count over where half of 12 would be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is half of 12. And I'm going to line up a little straight edge, a little ruler here. Okay, and I'm going to try to make that as neat and nice and straight as I can. Okay, so out of those, now I have 6 pieces on the left and 6 pieces on the right. So I want to try to create an equivalent fraction for 8/12, now turning it into 6. So again, look at the relationship between 6 and 12. So I know that 6 is half of 12. So when I create my drawing, I want to make sure that that represents the same amount. So again, think about if 6 is half of 12, what's going to be half of 8? Half of 8 is going to be 4. So I want to make sure that I have 4/6 of this rectangle shaded in. And then when I come down to the next equivalent fraction, I notice the denominator has now changed to thirds. So again, if I go back up and look at my picture, I can see that 1, 2, to go over here 1, 2, 3, 4, because I know that 3 fits into 12 4 times. So I'm going to try to line up my pen. Okay, so that would be 1/3, and obviously if I go over 1, 2, 3, 4 more, my pen, I've got my ruler here. Okay, so out of again that picture, I need to figure out how many thirds would be equivalent to 8/12. And I'm going to continue on with completing that page for today's work. I want you, when you're finished with pages 266 and 267, to circle 2 problems that you feel you did very well and you're confident on in terms of your answers. It's very important to me that I can see your work. I want you to submit it to me through Seesaw. Okay, and the last activity for today that we're going to work on, or it will be something that if you would like to, it's more of a optional activity, is going to be on a maze that's related to equivalent fractions. So that activity, okay, you can either download and you can print, or you can mark on if you can copy it and save it. Might be fun to do. Again, there's an answer key that goes along with each of these mazes that you're going to be working on today. Again, this is just optional if you finish your work today and you want a little bit more of an extended learning activity. So if you're going to choose to do this, I'm going to look at the start. And the first fraction I have is 4/5 and 1/15. So I need to look at the denominators, and I need to think, what would be the common denominator for 5 and 15? My options are 10, 20, or 15. So I know that if I do my multiples for 5, 10, 15, obviously I'm going to hit 15 when I count out my multiples for 5. And then 15, if I do my multiples for 15, the very first multiple would be 15. So I'm going to choose to go in this direction, because that would be the correct choice for the common denominator for both 4/5 and 1/15. Now I'm looking at 7/4 and 1/2. So again, just skip counting 2, 4, 6. Do my multiples for 2, 4, 6. Do my multiples for 4. 4, I come to 4 right away. 4 is a common multiple for both 2 and 4. So I'm going to head in this direction. Now, 8 over here also happens to be a multiple for both 2 and 4. But we're looking for the first common multiple that both of those denominators would have in common. So that's important to remember. There are answer keys provided for each of the mazes. There are 3 mazes. You are welcome to do 1, 2, or all 3. Check your answers when you're done. Let me know what you think about that activity. You can share your thoughts on Seesaw today. And we will convene on Wednesday to continue to talk more about math. Again, I hope you had a great weekend, and I hope to continue on Wednesday to look a little bit further into some things with fractions. Let me know how you're doing. Again, I miss you a great deal, and I will talk to you again on Wednesday. Have a great day.